So I'm Toby Winkup, Global Director of Critical Minerals for ERM. I am based here in Perth, which is Whadjuk Noongar country, and would like to start by acknowledging traditional owners of the land and their leaders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to thank PayDirt for the opportunity to present on something that I've spent most of my career on and am very passionate about, and that's ESG in the mining sector. Now, at the risk of stating the obvious, it's important to recognise that the mining sector is right at the start of a very complex and fragmented metals value chain. More specifically, with regards to the critical minerals value chain, which we're talking a lot about over these last couple of days, a combination of geopolitical complexity, historic mining practices, regulatory inconsistencies, ever-evolving and emerging mining standards, and the ability to access finance and the varying, at times opposing expectations of the stakeholders across that critical minerals value chain means our ability to explore, develop and optimise new mines at a pace and scale needed to achieve net zero by 2050 is being hindered. So today I want to share some thoughts and pose some questions on how the mining sector might evolve its current approach to give us a chance of getting the required minerals to market to get to net zero at 2050, but importantly without undermining the sustainable practices within the mining sector that have evolved over the last decade. So in the last 12 months, we've had US, Canada, UK, Europe and Australia waking up to the fact that China is well ahead when it comes to the security and supply of a significant number of minerals required for energy transition, technology and defence requirements. This has seen a rush of strategic initiatives that I've presented here and legislation to counter China's position, drive investment and create strategic geopolitical and economic partnerships. And although the intent is really clear, what it hasn't done or hasn't articulated is a mechanism to shift the pace and scale at which we can get the minerals explored and extracted and into market. There we go. So, you'll all be familiar with the graphs on this slide. Mineral demand to support net zero is the big one, and then by way of example, committed mine production versus demand to support sustainable development scenarios to 2030 for copper at the top and lithium at the bottom. So without going into the statistics, to achieve net zero by 2050, as well as continue to provide the minerals required for accelerating digital technology, critical minerals must be found and developed at a historically unprecedented pace and scale. Message is clear. We need more, and we need it now. However, given that on average, it can take 10 to 15 years to get a mine into production, even if we knew where all the minerals were today, we wouldn't see the required increase in metals to market until well into the next decade, by which time it's too late. And although recycling and circularity has a significant part to play in this, technology and scalability is about a decade away. So the current status quo needs to change. We need to find a way to accelerate that initial step in the critical minerals value chain from exploration to operation, and importantly without undermining the value and importance of sustainability in the sector. We also need to change the market's mindset on mining being the weak link in that critical minerals value chain, as typified by the recent article in the Mining Journal that stated, and I quote, "An industry not fit for purpose in a world craving an immediate surge in metals production." So with that in mind, this presentation is in two parts. Firstly, reshaping our thinking and relationships across the critical mineral value chain to de-bottleneck mineral exploration and mine development, differentiate product value and enhance innovation across the value chain. And the second part, I'll finish quickly with an overview of operationalising sustainability at the start of that value chain. And in doing so, de-risking projects, attracting investment, accelerating the timeframes to get minerals to market and supporting a just transition. At ERM, we like to call this the mine we all want to see. So it's a complex, non-linear network of stakeholders that I present in this slide, each with their own goals, concerns and expectation on what sustainability is. and the expected response from the mining sector with regard to that. There's various standards that define responsible mining that exist across the industry, and they are being adopted more broadly now, both geographically and by customers of mining clients who want to demonstrate their ESG credentials of their raw materials. The lack of equivalency between these various standards and how they are interpreted and implemented at different phases of the value chain is making it harder, particularly for the juniors and mids, to move their projects forward. Add to that lender expectations on sustainability, as well as the varying legislative requirements across state and federal jurisdictions at a global level, well, the complexity just grows. This is where we're at. So this slide captures some of the complexity that has been created for mining companies through varying expectations of stakeholders and guidelines across the value chain, from the ability to access funds like the IFC guidelines, to being compliant with legislation, and to meeting the expectations of potential customers and industry groups, be it ICMM, Towards Sustainable Mining, ERM, Copper Mark, or the LME, and various others. So we've been able to develop a digital tool that maps equivalency across these various requirements, and we're working with a number of the mining companies to help streamline their strategy on reporting and compliance across this standards landscape. Ideally though, the goal for the sector is to have consolidation at a global level, but the segmentation of the value chain will continue to create challenges in enabling this. So how do we get here? Well, there's another representation of the value chain, the various stages and companies and projects across that value chain. And let's reflect quickly on how we got to this stage of complexity. And it started about 20 years ago with regards to social licence to operate and also finance to operate, which moved the industry beyond just a purely compliant framework. This also saw the evolution of various standards and sector and industry standards, the intent of which was to improve sustainable performance. And it was necessary at the time, and although the sector has made great progress, more needs to be done with regards to how we transform around sustainability. Lots of companies in the last couple of days talking about ESG and the importance of ESG, and that's really positive to see. Now, but there's been an acceleration in industry standards over the last 5 years, which have been adopted across the metals value chain. Most recently, and in response to consumer expectations with regards to product and brand differentiation in the market. The OEMs have adopted some of these requirements, particularly with regards to traceability and guarantee of sustainability credentials, which then they can market with regards to where and how they've obtained metals from their supply chain. Now, the rating agencies, they're also using this as a mechanism to benchmark performance, though it's not always clear on how this is done, and there's a groundswell of perspectives that suggest that this is less than helpful. So as I said previously, although the intent is right, we are now at a stage where the expectation on the mining sector to comply and report against these various standards has moved us beyond an effective means of working with our stakeholders to enable us to evolve sustainability in the sector and get those metals to market as well. We're now being pushed into a compliance at all cost mindset, and the value chain that needs our minerals is creating a significant constraint on our ability to find and then get those metals to market to support the net zero agenda. But if we shifted our thinking from sector to value chain, would it give us the chance of getting minerals to market at the pace and scale required, whilst enabling the mining sector to regain the narrative around sustainability? And please bear with me while I use the airline alliances as an analogy to rethink the critical minerals value chain. So in 1997, Star Alliance created a new milestone for the airline industry as the first global airline alliance linking 5 major airlines into a single network. It offered a completely new type of service to the international traveller, and the alliance allowed airlines to work together to share everything from flight routes to airport lounges, ground crews and ticketing systems. This created operational and cost efficiency and most importantly, competitive advantage in the market. It transformed the industry, creating an industry based on end-to-end strategy and competition, capturing volume, and delivering superior yields for Alliance members, whether they are upstream or downstream in the value chain. So my question to this group, don't have to answer it now, but how could alliances be formed across the critical minerals value chain to transform how we get the required minerals to market in the timeframes required, and also enabling capital to flow to the clean or low carbon mineral mines in preference to more traditional approaches to the industry? We've got aspects of this already, don't get me wrong, where meaningful JV relationships have been established, often to guarantee supply by the OEMs. However, these tend to be transactional relationships with the customer holding the purchasing power in that relationship. So what would the advantage of a critical mineral alliance be? Well, primarily, it would provide a catalyst to get minerals to market quicker, whilst creating greater market access and market advantage through offering differentiated product that has reliable and traceable ESG credentials across the entire value chain. There'll be other advantages too, such as the ability to maintain a singular narrative across that alliance on ESG and the applicability of the myriad of standards and frameworks. It provides traceability of product across the value chain and a means of collective response to market opportunity and market risk. It would also enable the transference of process technology up and down the supply chain, and in doing so, drive innovation and accelerate transformation. The other advantage is it would enable mining companies to regain the narrative on sustainable mining and the importance of setting that benchmark right at the beginning of the value chain, rather than it being dictated to others from up the value chain who don't understand the complexity of mining. Now at ERM, we've developed a practical and pragmatic and scalable approach to sustainable mining that allows the sector to regain that narrative, and we call it the mine we want to see. It's presented here. We developed it about 5 years ago, and it sets a framework for sustainable mining to establish metals ecosystems for mining companies, communities, customers and investors through responsible mining. It guides the journey from safe, effective, inclusive and technology-enabled mining practices, from exploration through to closure, to deliver both societal and commercial value. There's a lot of detail behind these. I won't go into it because I don't have time, but it sets out on how you design your mine to optimise performance, water management at a watershed scale, how you decarbonise from the very first phase of exploration and resource definition through to building financial resilience by embedding sustainability in your core strategy. There's elements of product stewardship and shared value. We're working with through the risks and opportunities through the life cycle of the mine with shareholders, stakeholders, First Nations and rights holders, and integrating social performance into your core business model. Nature and biodiversity is becoming more and more important, and just quickly to note, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosure has just been released, and that builds on the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. And the last is leaving a positive legacy at closure to sort of apply sort of new mindsets and co-create sort of land use post-mining to see it as the next phase of that land use, not the end of it. So I've only got a minute left, but I'll touch on briefly on the fact that this is why about 4 years ago ERM acquired CSA, who are global leaders in geoscience, resource estimation, geometallurgy and mine engineering, because sustainable mining starts right at exploration and resource definition. So just to finish, and thank you for your time, and perhaps to start a conversation rather than to finish it. Regulatory frameworks and industry standards, although necessary, are putting significant constraints on the sector's performance because of how they're being interpreted and used by others across that critical minerals value chain. We need to rethink our approach to that value chain in order to have a chance of getting the minerals to market at the pace and scale required to achieve net zero by 2050. And the sector needs to regain that narrative from those up the value chain on what sustainable mining is. The mine we all want to see provides a clear framework for doing that. So thank you very much for your time. It's been great to be here.